A girl wakes up on Velvet, sold like property. A feared Mafia boss throws his coat over her and says one thing: "You're safe with me." Sounds insane until the streets prove him right. He doesn't touch her, he guards her. And when bullets fly at a clinic, he's the wall between her and death. But there's a darker game. Her father's forged papers, secret deeds in her name, and a charity that washes blood money. A smiling cop wants to protect her. A rival crew wants to own her. The boss offers a public claim. Safety that looks like a scandal. She says yes, on her terms. Then she's taken, and the city learns why everyone fears him. One last trap. One dirty officer, one choice that could free a lot more than her. Did he buy a girl? Or did he buy a war? And when the truth explodes, does protection become love? Or the perfect bait? Through heavy eyelids, Leah fought to focus on the blurred shapes moving around her. The velvet chaise beneath her felt too soft, too alien. Her mouth tasted like metal and chemicals, her thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm. Men's voices drifted above her, discussing numbers that made her stomach turn. 200,000, 350, 500,000, final offer. The words floated in and out like radio static. She tried to lift her head, but it felt weighted with lead. The ornate ceiling of the Riverfront Club spun lazily above her. Sold. The word cut through her haze like a knife, a cold, precise voice that brought goosebumps to her skin. Heavy footsteps approached. Through her blurred vision, she made out an imposing figure in a dark suit. He shrugged off something soft and expensive, a cashmere coat that settled over her like a shield. "Face the wall, all of you!" The same cold voice, but now edged with authority that brooked no argument. The shuffling of feet followed as men turned away. Leah tried to speak, but her tongue felt thick. Strong arms lifted her carefully, the coat tucked around her. "My name is Elias Moretti," the voice said near her ear. "You're leaving with me now." 4 men in suits flanked them as they moved through the club's shadowy interior. The night air hit her face, sharp and sobering. A sleek black car waited, its engine purring. Inside the vehicle, Leah's head began to clear enough for fear to take hold. Her heart hammered against her ribs as fragments of conversation filtered through. Patrick Hart's debts. Forged signatures. Collateral arrangement. Her father's name made her flinch. Elias Moretti, the man who now owned her, watched her with dark, unreadable eyes. "Yes," he said, answering her unspoken question. "Your father used your name. The debts are technically yours now." The city lights blurred past the tinted windows. They pulled up to a towering building of glass and steel, its upper floors disappearing into low clouds. Elias guided her into a private elevator that whispered upward to his penthouse. The space was massive and modern, all clean lines and cool surfaces, warmed by subtle lighting. Leah's legs trembled as Elias led her to a leather sofa. "Dr. Voss will be here shortly," he said, stepping back to give her space. "She'll help clear the drugs from your system." An elegant woman in her 50s arrived within minutes, medical bag in hand. She checked Leah's vitals with gentle efficiency while Elias spoke from across the room. "You have my word. No one touches you without your explicit consent. That includes me." His voice was matter-of-fact. "But understand this, outside these walls, there are people who would hurt you far worse than I ever would. You need my protection." Dr. Voss administered something to counteract the drugs in Leah's system. Slowly, the room stopped spinning, though exhaustion settled deep in her bones. As false dawn began to paint the sky, Leah found herself on the penthouse balcony. Elias's cashmere coat and a thick blanket wrapped around her shoulders couldn't completely ward off the pre-dawn chill. Below, the city was beginning to stir, early traffic moving like blood through veins. "I'm going home in the morning," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Behind her, a heavy security gate hummed as it locked into place. A camera mounted on the corner of the building turned smoothly, its lens focusing on the dark river below. The weight of what had happened pressed down on her. Her father had sold her to pay his debts, to a man who ruled the criminal underworld of Greybridge with calculated precision. Elias Moretti's reputation preceded him. His business dealings were legendary, his retribution swift and merciless. Yet he had shown unexpected gentleness, covering her, protecting her modesty, bringing in a doctor. The contradiction made her head spin more than the lingering effects of the drugs. From her vantage point, she could see the river winding through the city like a black ribbon. The same river she had passed countless times on her way to the university, where she helped troubled kids express their trauma through art. That normal life felt like a distant dream now. The security camera continued its steady sweep, a reminder that while this cage might be gilded, it was still a cage. The morning light caught the glass and steel of the building, making it gleam like a blade. Leah pulled the coat tighter around herself, breathing in the subtle scent of expensive cologne and wool. Her mind kept circling back to her father, to the betrayal that had landed her here. The man who had raised her alone after her mother died, who had attended every art show, who had cried at her graduation, had sold her like property. The city below continued to wake, oblivious to how her world had shattered. Delivery trucks made their rounds, early commuters hurried to catch buses, a police siren wailed in the distance. The normalcy of it all felt like a cruel joke. The balcony door slid open behind her, nearly silent on its tracks. She didn't turn around, but she felt Elias's presence like a physical thing. He didn't speak, didn't move closer, just stood guard as the sun crept higher over the horizon. The river caught the first rays of morning light, its surface flickering like scattered diamonds. Somewhere in the distance, church bells began to toll, marking the hour. The sound carried clearly in the morning air, counting out the moments of her old life slipping away. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows as Leah systematically tested every possible exit. Her footsteps echoed off marble floors as she moved from door to door, each one revealing another layer of security. Reinforced steel cores in all external doors, Soren explained, following at a respectful distance. His military bearing was evident in his precise movements. Biometric locks, emergency protocols. The elevator requires keycard access for this floor. Leah pressed her palm against a window, feeling the thickness of the glass. Below, 2 black SUVs idled in the private garage entrance, drivers alert and waiting. Those men, she gestured downward. They're not just drivers, are they? Security detail, Soren confirmed. 4-man rotating teams armed. Her hands trembled as she gripped the window frame. The city looked different in daylight, less threatening, but somehow more alien. The smell of fresh coffee cut through her thoughts. Elias appeared beside her, setting a steaming mug on the nearest table. You're still shaky from the sedatives. This will help. She wrapped her fingers around the warm ceramic, trying to still their trembling. Elias waited until she took a sip before speaking again. These are my terms, he said, his voice calm and measured. Stay here under Dr. Voss's care until the drugs clear your system completely. I'll show you proof of the threats against you. Then you decide whether to accept my public claim of protection. Leah's grip tightened on the mug. Claim? Like ownership? Like a shield, he corrected. In my world, it means you're off limits. No one touches what's mine. He produced a key from his pocket and set it on the table between them. The guest suite is yours. The lock works from the inside. No one enters without your permission. I don't belong to anyone, Leah said firmly, setting down the coffee. I want to go home. Now. Without a word, Elias took out his phone and pulled up a security feed. 2 men lounged against the wall near her apartment building's entrance, trying to look casual but failing. Their eyes constantly scanned the street. Bogdan Dragon's men, Elias said. They've been there since dawn. The morning stretched into afternoon. Leah showered in the guest bathroom, the hot water failing to wash away the feeling of vulnerability. She ate the food Soren brought, some kind of gourmet pasta that she barely tasted, and read through the files Elias provided. Bogdan Dragon's dossier made her stomach turn. Human trafficking, extortion, a string of missing women. The Balkan crew's reputation for brutality was well documented. The other file held copies of power of attorney documents with her forged signature. Her father's desperate gamble had made her legally responsible for his debts. The papers swam before her eyes as fury and betrayal warred in her chest. She watched the sun sink toward the horizon, timing her escape. The security would change shifts at dusk. If she could just get to the elevator. Leah slipped out of the guest suite, moving silently through the penthouse. The inner gate of steel mesh came into view, and beyond it, 4 armed men stationed outside the elevator. Their weapons were holstered but obvious. The realization hit her like a physical blow. There was no way out, no safe path back to her old life. The art therapy sessions with troubled kids, her tiny apartment filled with half-finished paintings, the simple freedom of walking down the street, all of it was gone. Her legs gave out, and she sank to the floor, back pressed against the cool wall. The trembling returned, worse than before. She didn't know how long she sat there before finding the strength to stand. When she made her way back to the living area, Elias was waiting. Without a word, he knelt before her, taking her shaking hands in his. He wrapped her fingers around a glass of water, steadying them until she could lift it to her lips without spilling. That's when she saw it, a grand piano tucked into the corner of the room. The black lacquer gleamed in the fading light, but the keys showed signs of frequent use, their ivory faces worn smooth by countless hours of play. The sight of something so cultured, so incongruous with the armed men and security cameras, made her pause. Like the gentle way Elias steadied her hands, it suggested layers she hadn't expected in this dangerous man who had bought her freedom with her own captivity. She looked down at where he still knelt, supporting her trembling fingers around the glass. His hands were warm, steady, careful not to grip too tight. The same hands that commanded an empire of violence, now ensuring she didn't spill a drop of water. The sunset painted the penthouse in shades of amber and gold, softening the modern edges of steel and glass. Outside, the city lights began to flicker on one by one, creating constellations of artificial stars. The armed men remained at their posts, the cameras continued their vigilant sweep, and somewhere in the city, Bogdan's men waited for her to make a mistake. But in this moment, there was only the worn piano keys, the warmth of steady hands, steadying shaking ones, and the weight of a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. The kitchen's bright lights cast harsh shadows across the marble island where Leah sat, her fingers drumming against the cool stone. The detox meds had cleared her head, but that only made everything sharper, harder to ignore. Her jaw clenched as Elias spread out papers in front of her with methodical precision. "Your father opened these accounts 8 months ago," he said, his voice neutral. "Each required your signature and social security number." Leah's gaze swept over the bank statements. 6 different accounts, all with her name. "Which I never gave him." "No." Elias slid another document forward. "The initial deposits came from property sales. Buildings your father liquidated, using forged powers of attorney. You're listed as the beneficiary of a trust holding several more properties. Making me responsible for his debts." The words tasted bitter. "And a target." "Yes." He didn't soften the truth. "The access codes and account credentials tied to your identity are valuable. Multiple organizations would pay well for them, or try to force you to hand them over." Leah lifted her chin. "And your solution is to mark me as your property." "My solution is to offer you protection through a public claim." His gray eyes met hers steadily. "It's a clear message in my world. Touch her, and you answer to me. And if I refuse, then I increase your security anyway, and we find another way." He checked his watch. "Take 24 hours to decide. I won't force this on you, Leah." She studied him, trying to read past that controlled expression. "Why help me at all?" "Because you're innocent in this, and I protect innocent people when I can." He gathered the papers into a folder. "The rest of the documents are here. Review them, ask questions." Alone in the living room, Leah spread the papers across the coffee table. Her father's familiar scrawl mocked her from forged signatures. The property deeds showed a pattern, buildings sold just before market upswings, the profits flowing through her accounts before vanishing. Hours passed as she traced the money trail. The sky outside darkened to velvet black, city lights twinkling like fallen stars. Her neck ached from bending over documents. Soren appeared silently at her elbow with fresh coffee. 3 different groups asked about you today," he said quietly. "Russians, triads, and some freelancers. The threat is real and growing." Leah's hands shook slightly as she took the coffee. "Thank you for telling me the truth." He nodded once and melted back into the shadows of his post. Near midnight, soft piano notes drifted from down the hall. Leah followed the sound to find Elias in a dimly lit room, his fingers moving over the keys in a gentle melody. Something classical she almost recognized. The music seemed to match her breathing, slowly steadying her racing thoughts. He stopped when she appeared in the doorway. "I apologize if I disturbed you." "No, please." She settled onto a leather sofa, clutching the file folder. "Keep playing, it helps." After a moment's hesitation, he resumed the piece. Leah opened the folder again, but found herself watching his hands instead. They moved with the same precise control he showed in everything, but there was something almost tender in how they touched the keys. The melody wrapped around her like a blanket, making the harsh reality of bank statements and forged documents somehow more bearable. Her eyelids grew heavy as the music continued, soft and steady. She didn't remember closing her eyes. But suddenly it was 1 a.m. The last note hung in the air like mist as something warm settled over her. Through half-closed eyes, she saw Elias carefully draping a cashmere throw across her shoulders. "Sleep," he murmured. "I've set an alarm for your clinic appointment tomorrow." Leah wanted to thank him, for the blanket, the music, the truth. But sleep pulled her under before she could form the words. The file folder rose and fell on her chest with each breath as the piano's final note faded into silence. The penthouse settled into nighttime quiet, broken only by the soft hum of security systems and Soren's measured footsteps on patrol. Outside, the city sparkled with artificial constellations, while inside, a woman slept under the protection of a man who dealt in both violence and Mozart. Through the wall of windows, the river reflected the moon's silver path across its dark surface. The same river that had witnessed her sail now watched over her rest, its steady flow a reminder that everything changes, even the most desperate circumstances. In the shadows, Elias moved silently to his desk, keeping Leah in his peripheral vision while he reviewed security reports. His fingers occasionally strayed to the piano keys, but he didn't play again, letting her sleep undisturbed. The night deepened around them, a strange pocket of peace in a situation that was anything but peaceful. Tomorrow would bring decisions and dangers, but for now, there was only the quiet, the moonlight, and the trust of sleep earned through simple honesty. Soren passed by the door on his rounds, noting Leah's sleeping form and Elias's vigilant presence. He adjusted his patrol route to include more frequent checks of this room, his training recognizing both the tactical vulnerability of sleep and the importance of protecting these moments of rest. The file folder rose and fell with each of Leah's steady breaths, its damning contents temporarily forgotten in slumber. The piano stood silent witness, its keys holding the memory of music that had guided her to this moment of peace, however brief it might be. A gentle knock pulled Leah from sleep. Dawn hadn't yet touched the horizon when she blinked awake to find Soren holding out a jacket. The leather was butter soft against her fingers. "Dr. Voss is waiting at the clinic," he said quietly. "We need to move now while it's still dark." In the garage, 3 identical black SUVs idled. Soren guided her to the middle one, scanning the shadows as Elias joined them. The convoy split at the first intersection, their vehicle taking a maze-like path through empty streets. The private clinic occupied the top floor of a modern medical building. Dr. Voss met them in a pristine examination room, her white coat crisp despite the early hour. "I'll need blood samples first," she said, gathering supplies. Leah rolled up her sleeve, watching the vial fill with dark red. The fluorescent lights made everything seem harsh and stark. A soft scuff in the hallway made Elias's head snap up. In one fluid motion, he pushed Leah behind him as the door burst open. 2 men in dark clothes rushed in, weapons raised. What happened next burned into Leah's memory like a photograph negative. Elias moved with lethal grace, his hands finding precise points on the first attacker's body. There was a sharp crack, then silence. The second man barely had time to aim before Elias reached him. "Down!" Soren's voice cut through the chaos. He grabbed Dr. Voss and yanked her toward a back door as more footsteps thundered down the hall. Elias's body sheltered Leah, solid and unmovable. His breath was steady even as violence exploded around them. 2 more attackers fell, their bodies hitting the floor with terrible finality. When silence fell again, Elias cupped Leah's face in his hands. His touch was impossibly gentle as he wiped something warm and wet from her cheek. Blood, she realized distantly. Not hers. "Are you hurt?" His voice was low, controlled. She shook her head, unable to look away from his eyes. They were the same steel gray as always, but now she saw what they truly meant. This was Elias Moretti as the world knew him, death wrapped in expensive wool and perfect manners. Soren returned with Dr. Voss, who looked shaken but professional. "The back stairs are clear," he reported. "Building security is sweeping the perimeter." "Complete her exam," Elias ordered, passing Leah back to the doctor. "Document everything from the original drugging, every mark." Dr. Voss's hands were steady as she photographed fading bruises on Leah's arms where rough hands had gripped her that first night. She drew more blood, ran tox screens, tested Leah's reflexes and pupils. "The sedatives are nearly cleared from your system," she said finally. "But you'll need rest to fully recover." The drive back to the penthouse was tense, their route even more circuitous. Elias spoke quietly into his phone, directing teams to gather security footage from every camera that might have caught the attackers. Leah watched the city wake up outside her window. Office workers clutching coffee cups had no idea what had happened in that clinic. No idea that men lay dead, while others in expensive suits calculated the cost of cleaning up blood. By midday, the penthouse hummed with controlled activity. Security teams came and went, reporting camera angles and witness statements. Leah stood in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a cooling mug of tea, watching Elias coordinate it all with cold efficiency. When the room finally emptied, she found her voice. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for saving my life." He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "You don't need to thank me." "I won't be a pawn in whatever game this is," she continued, lifting her chin. "I won't be moved around a board for someone else's strategy." "A pawn is moved by others," he replied, his voice softening slightly. "I'm offering you the power to make your own choices, to call me in or send me away. The protection remains either way, but the terms are yours to set." The afternoon stretched long as Leah processed everything she'd seen, the deadly grace of his movements, the gentleness of his touch on her face, the blood, and the boardroom manner existing in the same man. She moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching boats cut white paths through the river below. The city looked deceptively peaceful from this height. "I need evidence," she whispered, her breath fogging the glass. "Before I agree to anything, I need to see what I'm walking into." A soft click made her turn. Elias had placed a tablet on the coffee table, its screen glowing with folders labeled Dragon Network and financial records. "Full access," he said, stepping back. "Read only, but complete. Every piece of intelligence we have on Bogdan Dragon's organization. Take all the time you need." Leah picked up the tablet, its weight somehow both lighter and heavier than she expected. Like the choice before her, simple on the surface but complex in its implications. Outside, the afternoon sun painted the river gold, while inside, a woman stood at a crossroads. Behind her, a man who dealt in both death and mercy waited for her decision. The tablet in her hands held dark truths about the forces arrayed against her, truths that would change everything once she read them. The penthouse was quiet now, the earlier chaos replaced by a heavy stillness. Soren's team maintained their posts, watching over a scene that looked peaceful but crackled with unseen tension. Like the calm surface of deep water, hiding currents that could either carry you to safety or pull you under. Steam rose from the pot of pasta as Elias stirred, his sleeves rolled to his elbows. The domesticity of the scene felt surreal after the morning's violence. Leah sat at the kitchen island, surrounded by financial documents spread across the tablet's screen, her fingers tracing patterns only she could see. The kitchen smelled of garlic and herbs, a stark contrast to the antiseptic scent that had filled the clinic hours ago. Leah's stomach growled, reminding her that fear had stolen her appetite all day. "You'll need to eat," Elias said without turning. "The files will still be there after dinner." She hummed in acknowledgement, zooming in on a series of transactions that caught her eye. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger alerts. 500 here, 800 there, all flowing to a charity called Bridge Aid. "These donations," she said, frowning, "they're too perfect." Elias placed a bowl of pasta in front of her. "How so?" "They're positioned at key points in the money flow, like—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Like stepping stones across a river. Small enough to look legitimate, but they create a path." He leaned over her shoulder, his presence solid and warm. "Bridge Aid. We've suspected it's a front, but proving it has been difficult. They do enough real humanitarian work to pass inspection." Leah took a bite of pasta, barely tasting it as her mind worked. "Look here," she pointed. "And here. My father's signature pattern, splitting larger amounts into smaller transfers, using multiple accounts." She swiped through more documents. "He used my identity to create these accounts. That's why they're hunting me. I'm the key to accessing these funds." "You've found what my best analysts missed," Elias said quietly. She straightened, energy coursing through her despite her exhaustion. "We can use this. Build a paper trail, linking Bridge Aid to their shell companies. Show how my father used my identity, then leak just enough information to flush out their handlers." Elias studied her face, his expression thoughtful. "It's risky. Less risky than waiting for them to find me." She met his gaze steadily. "But I have conditions for any public claim." He gestured for her to continue, settling onto the stool beside her. "I keep my job at the art therapy clinic," she began. "My passport stays in my possession, and most importantly, I maintain complete autonomy over my body and my choices. This arrangement is about protection, not ownership." "Agreed," he said without hesitation. "To all of it." She blinked, surprised by his quick acceptance. "Just like that?" "Just like that." His lips curved slightly. "I told you before, the terms are yours to set. I'm a man of my word, Leah." They ate in companionable silence, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. Around 11, Elias pulled up the security feed from her apartment building on a separate screen. Leah's breath caught as she watched two men approach her door. They wore maintenance uniforms, but their movements were too practiced, too careful. One tested her lock while the other kept watch. The rage she'd been holding back all day crystallized into something harder, colder. Her father had done this, used her name, her future, her very identity as collateral for his debts, had thrown her to wolves in expensive suits who would tear her apart to get what they wanted. She set down her fork with deliberate care. "Tomorrow at noon," she said, her voice steady. "I'll stand beside you in public and accept the claim, on my terms." Elias's eyes met hers, gray as storm clouds and just as intense. "Then at noon tomorrow, the city will understand you are under my protection." The night stretched around them, filled with the quiet hum of security systems and the distant sound of river traffic. In the kitchen of a fortress-like penthouse, a woman who refused to be a victim sat across from a dangerous man who had killed to protect her that morning. The tablet between them glowed with evidence of corruption, each transaction a link in a chain that had nearly dragged her under. But Leah wasn't drowning anymore. She was building her own ladder out of bank statements and ledgers, turning her father's betrayal into a weapon she could wield. Soren appeared, silently to clear their plates, his presence a reminder of the constant surveillance that now surrounded her. The security feed continued to play, showing the men at her door finally retreating, but the violation remained. They had tried to take her home, just as they had tried to take her freedom. Elias moved to the windows, his reflection overlaying the city lights. The piano stood silent in the corner, its keys untouched since the previous night. The peaceful moment when he had played while she read felt like it belonged to a different lifetime. The clock crept toward midnight, marking the end of one chapter of her life and the beginning of another. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges: the public claim, the carefully orchestrated leak of information, the dangerous game of drawing out their enemies. But tonight, in this strange bubble of pasta dinners and financial forensics, Leah finally felt the fog of fear lifting. She had a plan, allies, and most importantly, she had choices. They weren't the choices she would have wanted, but they were hers to make. Outside, the river flowed on, carrying boats past the glittering towers of the financial district where so much of this story had begun. Inside, a woman who had woken up as property was preparing to turn herself into a shield, and a man who dealt in violence had agreed to let her write her own rules. Leah woke before dawn, her body tense with anticipation. She paced the penthouse's shadowed halls, each step an attempt to ground herself in the reality of what lay ahead. The city beyond the windows was still draped in pre-morning darkness, lights twinkling like scattered stars. In the guest bathroom, Dr. Voss's fingers moved with practiced efficiency, weaving Leah's dark hair into an elegant braid. "The cameras will love this," she said softly. "Strong, classic, memorable." Soren stood in the doorway, his posture relaxed but alert. "2 cars, staggered departure. We'll take 5th to avoid construction, then loop around the museum's north side. Security's already swept the perimeter twice." Leah met her own reflection's eyes. The woman staring back looked collected, poised, nothing like the drugged girl who'd woken on a velvet chaise less than a week ago. "How many photographers?" "Enough to make it count," Soren replied. "Not enough to make it obvious." The morning passed in a blur of preparation. Leah chose a cream-colored blazer that spoke of boardrooms rather than bedrooms, tailored pants, and heels that made her feel armored. Elias wore charcoal gray, the cut of his suit emphasizing the controlled power in his movements. At precisely noon, they emerged onto the museum steps. Winter sunlight caught the brass railings, making them gleam. Below, the promised photographers pretended to cover the charity gala while tracking their every move. Elias's hand settled at her lower back, warm through the silk of her blouse. The touch was possessive, but not demanding. A statement rather than a claim. Leah let herself lean into him, turning their posed moment into something that looked natural, intimate. Camera shutters clicked in rapid succession. She could almost hear the rumors spreading through the city's underground networks. Elias Moretti's new woman, protected, off limits. They slipped away from the crowd, finding refuge in a narrow side street. Festival preparations had transformed it into a pocket of magic. Garlands of white lights crisscrossed overhead, swaying gently in the December breeze. The air between them felt charged, electric. Elias turned toward her, his gray eyes dark with intent. He moved closer, one hand rising to cup her cheek. Heat bloomed under her skin, desire tangling with the day's adrenaline rush. Their breath mingled in the cold air. Leah pulled back slightly, pressing her palm against his chest. "Not like this," she whispered. Not with fear still echoing in my head. I want to be sure. His expression softened with understanding. He stepped back, giving her space while keeping her within the circle of his protection. I need to check the perimeter sweep, he said, already reaching for his phone. Stay with Soren. Leah nodded, watching him move a few yards away. His voice carried in the quiet alley, fragments of conversation that made her blood run cold. Perfect leverage. Use it as an accelerant. The words hit her like slaps. Was this what she was to him? A convenient tool to bait Dragon's organization? The anger she thought she'd processed came rushing back, hot and bitter in her throat. The ride home was weighted with silence. Leah stared out the window, seeing nothing of the passing streets. Every attempt at conversation from Elias met with monosyllabic responses until he stopped trying. Back at the penthouse, she retreated to her suite without a word. The lock engaged with a decisive click, a small act of defiance, of maintaining control. That's when she saw it. A key placed on her nightstand, a cream-colored note beside it in Elias's precise handwriting. Doors open both ways. He must have slipped it under the door earlier before they left. The gesture should have soothed her, but it tangled with the overheard words, creating a knot of confusion in her chest. Leah lay on the bed, fully dressed, staring at the coffered ceiling. Afternoon light painted shifting patterns through the windows, marking time's slow passage. Her father's face kept appearing in her mind. The man who'd raised her, taught her to read financial statements, then used her identity like a blank check. She needed answers, not filtered through Elias's intelligence, not pieced together from bank statements and ledgers. She needed to look her father in the eye and hear him explain why he'd sacrificed his daughter's safety for his debts. The ceiling offered no answers, but her resolve hardened with each passing minute. She would find her father tonight, before doubt or fear could change her mind. The answers she sought weren't in these gilded rooms, no matter how safe their walls might be. Outside, the city moved through its afternoon routines. Delivery trucks rumbled past. A helicopter's blades chopped through the air somewhere distant. Inside her locked sanctuary, Leah's mind raced through possibilities and contingencies. The key Elias had left caught the light, a small symbol of choice in a situation where most of her choices had been stripped away. She picked it up, feeling its weight in her palm. Freedom and constraint, protection and possession, trust and betrayal, all of it balanced on this small piece of metal. She set it back down carefully. Tonight would bring answers, one way or another. Her father would face her questions, and she would finally understand the true depth of his betrayal. The sunset painted the city in shades of amber and shadow as Leah's fingers closed around the key Elias had left. Her heart thundered against her ribs, but her hands remained steady. She'd timed this perfectly. The shift change meant reduced surveillance, a small window of opportunity. I need some air, she told Soren, gesturing toward the balcony. His eyes held a flicker of concern, but he nodded. Protocol allowed her outdoor access within the secure perimeter. Once outside, she moved with purpose. The service stairs weren't monitored as heavily as the main exits. Each step down felt like both escape and betrayal, the weight of her choice pressing against her chest. Her phone screen glowed in the growing darkness. The number was still there, though she'd sworn to delete it a dozen times. Her father's number. She typed quickly before doubt could creep in. I will meet you for answers. 1 hour, the old depot. In his penthouse office, Elias noticed the balcony door alarm indicator shift from green to red. His jaw tightened as security footage confirmed his fear. Leah had slipped away. He could mobilize his entire team, drag her back within minutes. Instead, he chose restraint, dispatching only shadow surveillance to track her movements. Trust, once broken, rarely mended. The abandoned rail depot loomed against the twilight sky, its skeleton of steel and concrete a monument to industrial decay. Leah's footsteps echoed through empty loading bays. The air smelled of rust and stagnant water. Patrick emerged from behind a pillar, his hands visibly trembling. Even in the dim light, Leah could see how fear had aged him. New lines carved around his mouth, his shoulders hunched beneath his worn jacket. I had to protect you, he started, voice cracking. Elias? He was the only one I could trust. 2 years ago, he took down an entire trafficking operation, never bragged about it, never used it for leverage. I thought he'd keep you safe. By selling me, Leah's voice cut through the cold air. By forging my signature? The debts. They were going to kill us both. I had to. The red dot appeared on the concrete near Patrick's feet, then crawled up his chest. Leah's warning died in her throat as the shot cracked through the depot's hollow space. Her father crumpled, a dark stain spreading across his shirt. Bogdan Dragan stepped from the shadows, his smile sharp as broken glass. Two men flanked him, their rifles trained on Leah. "Your father was always a liability," he said, his accent thick with amusement. "But you are the key to unlocking something much more valuable." Cold metal pressed against her temple. "Move," Dragan ordered. "Your thumbprint and presence will open doors that have been frustratingly closed to me." They marched her to a waiting van, its engine already running. Through her rising panic, Leah focused on details. 3 lefts, 1 right, the sound of trains in the distance. Elias arrived at the depot minutes later, finding only cooling shell casings in Patrick's body. His usual controlled expression cracked for a moment as he knelt to check the casings. "Lock down every route out of the city," he commanded into his phone. "Find that van." His criminal network activated within seconds. Dock workers, street vendors, mechanics, all eyes searching for Dragan's vehicle. Elias moved through the depot with lethal grace, gathering every detail that might lead to Leah. In a warehouse somewhere across the city, rough hands pushed Leah into an office chair. The blindfold blocked all light, but she could smell mold and machine oil. Zip ties bit into her wrists. She bit the inside of her cheek, using the sharp pain to stay focused, to listen. Footsteps on concrete, men speaking in low voices, the distant sound of water. They were near the river. A door squeaked 2 rooms away, keys jangling. Every detail became a weapon for later use. The warehouse felt vast around her, its empty spaces amplifying every sound. Dragan's men moved with military precision, 3 distinct patterns of footsteps patrolling regular intervals. A phone rang somewhere to her left, quickly silenced. Leah forced her breathing to remain steady, fighting against the panic that clawed at her throat. The zip ties were tight, but not cutting off circulation. She could work with that. The chair was solid wood, probably bolted down. The air felt damp against her skin, confirming their proximity to water. More voices joined the mix. At least 5 distinct sources now. Papers rustled nearby, someone typed on a keyboard. Each sound built a mental map she refused to lose to fear. The blindfold pressed against her eyelids, but Leah kept them open behind the fabric. Every muscle in her body yearned to struggle, to scream, to give in to terror. Instead, she remained still, gathering intelligence with each passing second. Dragan's voice carried from another room, discussing coordinates and timing. A door slammed somewhere in the building's depths. The scratch of boots on concrete told her someone stood guard just outside the office. The zip ties would leave marks, evidence for later. The chair's arms were smooth beneath her fingertips, no splinters to work with. But information was gathering in her mind like water filling a cistern, each detail a potential lifeline. The machine oil's acrid smell burned Leah's nostrils as she worked the zip tie against the filing cabinet's bolt head, careful to keep the sound below a whisper. Her wrists ached, but each scrape deepened the groove that might free her. 3 distinct patterns of footsteps echoed through the warehouse. One heavy and irregular, another crisp and military, the third with a slight shuffle. The ancient elevator's whine cut through the darkness every few minutes, marking time like a broken metronome. "Your father wasted my time with excuses too," Dragan said, his voice closer now. The office door creaked open. "But you are smarter than him, yes?" He thrust a tablet in front of her face, its screen showing familiar trust account prompts. "Enter the codes." Leah squinted at the screen, her heart hammering. "I can't read this without my glasses," she said, letting exhaustion leak into her voice. "And there's a biometric reset sequence." "Do not play games." Dragan's fingers dug into her shoulder. "It's 2-factor authentication," she continued, forcing her voice steady. "Retinal scan plus fingerprint timed sequence. Get it wrong and it locks for 12 hours. The ancient elevator whined again. Footsteps shuffled past the door. Across the city, in a dim garage, Elias worked with cold precision. The courier lay crumpled at his feet, blood dripping from split lips, finally breaking after the 3rd finger. "Unit 417, the man gasped. "North side, Riverview." Elias's phone appeared in his hand. "Soren, 4th floor, north quadrant. No explosives. She's inside." 3 minutes out, Soren replied. "Team in position." "Surgical breach only. I want her clear before anyone moves on Dragan." Leah's fingers had gone numb around the zip tie, but she kept working it against the bolt. The groove was deeper now. One good twist might snap it. Dragan paced the small office, muttering into a phone in his native tongue. 2 guards stood outside. She could see their shadows beneath the door. The 3rd set of footsteps had vanished 10 minutes ago. The elevator's whine became a grinding screech. At 2:14 a.m., the door exploded inward in a cloud of smoke, Suppressed shots cracked through the haze, precise, controlled. Two shadows crumpled outside the door. Elias emerged from the smoke like a demon, all lethal grace and focused fury. His eyes found Leah instantly as his men swept the room. Dragan cursed and lunged for a panel in the wall, a trash chute, or laundry drop. "Clear her!" Elias barked, moving toward Dragan, but the crime boss had already disappeared down the chute with a metallic clang. Elias spun back to Leah, dragging her against his chest with one arm, while the other sliced through her restraints. His heartbeat thundered against her back, his breath hot on her neck. "Stairs!" Soren called from the doorway. 2 minutes until backup units respond. They moved as one unit through the smoke-filled corridor, Elias's arm still locked around Leah's waist. The freight stairs echoed with their rapid descent. Red emergency lights cast everything in blood-tinted shadows. A black SUV idled in the loading bay, engine purring. Soren took the wheel, while Elias bundled Leah into the back seat, his body covering hers as they peeled away from the warehouse. "Penthouse is compromised," Elias said, his voice tight. "Take us to Brighton." The city blurred past their tinted windows. Leah's wrists throbbed where the zip ties had cut into them. Elias's hand found hers in the darkness, his thumb tracing gentle circles over her pulse point. They drove for 30 minutes, taking random turns to shake any tail, before pulling into an underground garage beneath an old brownstone. The safe house occupied the building's top floor, sparse but secure, with reinforced doors and windows. Leah sank onto a leather couch, her legs finally giving out. Elias draped a heavy wool blanket over her shoulders while Soren swept the apartment and set up surveillance feeds. The pre-dawn hours crept by in tense silence. Leah watched Elias take up position in an armchair across from her, his gun resting on his thigh. His eyes remained fixed on the door, unblinking, as if he could hold the whole world at bay through sheer will. The blanket smelled faintly of cedar. Outside, the city's ambient noise felt distant and unreal. Leah's mind replayed the warehouse on loop. The smell of oil, the groove in the zip tie, the smoke and gunfire. Elias appearing like an avenging angel through the chaos. He hadn't moved from his vigil. The gun gleamed dully in the low light, and his shoulders remained perfectly straight despite the hour. Every few minutes, his gaze would flick to her face, checking, assessing, before returning to his watch. The safe house's heating system hummed softly. Somewhere nearby, early morning traffic began to build. Leah pulled the blanket tighter, watching her protector guard her through the last dark hours before dawn. His presence anchored her to the moment, keeping the night's horrors at bay. The sky outside the reinforced windows gradually shifted from black to deep blue. Elias maintained his position, a living shield between Leah and any threat that might emerge from the shadows. His dedication should have frightened her, this capacity for violence paired with such focused protection. Instead, she found herself drawing strength from his unwavering vigilance. Soren moved silently through his security checks, a ghost in the growing light. The safe house's defense systems hummed with quiet efficiency. And still, Elias watched, his gun ready, his eyes alert, guarding her through the final moments of night. Sunrise painted golden stripes across Leah's face. The rich aroma of coffee pulled her from sleep, and her first conscious thought was simple. She was alive. Her body ached from the warehouse ordeal, but her mind felt sharp. Across the room, Elias had finally succumbed to exhaustion in his sentinel's chair. His gun rested loosely in his fingers, head tilted slightly against the leather backrest. Leah crossed the room on silent feet. She'd never seen him vulnerable before. The hard lines of his face softened by sleep. The tension eased from his shoulders. With careful movements, she extracted the weapon from his grip and placed it on the nearby table. The wool blanket he'd given her hours ago still held her warmth as she draped it over him. In the safe house's kitchen, Soren nodded at her while monitoring feeds on multiple tablets. A garment bag hung by the bathroom door. "Clean clothes," he said quietly. "And Dr. Voss sent supplies for your wrists." The hot shower was a revelation, washing away the warehouse's lingering touch. The clothes fit perfectly. Soft black pants, a cream sweater, flat boots meant for quick movement. Dr. Voss had included antibiotic cream and bandages for the zip tie wounds. When Leah emerged, Elias was awake and scanning reports on his phone. His eyes tracked her movements as she poured coffee and settled at the kitchen counter with one of Soren's tablets. "We need to talk about Bridge Aid," she said, pulling up transaction records. "The shell companies aren't just cover for Dragan. Someone's protecting the whole network from inside the system." Elias moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel his body heat. "I've suspected a handler for months. The routes are too clean, too convenient. but I couldn't prove it. Look here. Leah's finger traced patterns across the screen. These micro-donations create a smokescreen, but the timing matches police patrol schedules perfectly. And these routing numbers? She pulled up another document. They're coded to internal department systems. Elias leaned closer, studying the data. You see patterns I missed entirely. It's not just patterns. Leah opened a new window. These authorization codes are tagged with an identifier, MD1985. Cross-reference that with Bridgade's board of directors. Miles Duval, Elias finished. Decorated captain, heads the Port Authority Division. He's been shepherding Dragon's shipments through customs checkpoints for years. Leah's voice held controlled anger. Using my father's forged documents as cover for some of the transfers, Soren joined them, examining the evidence. We need more than paper trails. Duval's too connected. He'll bury any indirect proof. Then we get direct proof. Leah straightened. Voice and face in the same frame, discussing quid pro quo. I can help set it up. No. Elias's response was immediate. You're not playing bait. I'm not playing anything, Leah countered. I'm choosing to be the architect. This is my plan, my choice. We leak specific details to make Duval nervous, then record him scrambling to contain it. Hours passed as they built the timeline. Soren mapped security blind spots, while Elias arranged untraceable recording equipment. Leah identified the perfect pressure points in Duval's carefully constructed facade. This investigative journalist, Elias said, showing her a profile. She's broken similar cases before. Completely independent, impossible to bribe. Perfect. Leah studied the woman's track record. We feed her breadcrumbs, let her follow them to the bigger story. Duval will have to respond personally once she starts asking questions. The sun had set by the time they finalized the details. Leah stood at the safe house window, watching city lights flicker to life. The protective glass was 2 inches thick, designed to stop bullets. I want to go back to the penthouse, she said without turning. She felt Elias move behind her, his reflection appearing in the window. It's not secure yet. I won't live in hiding forever. Now she did turn, meeting his gaze directly. The penthouse has better security than here. Double the guards if you need to, but I won't let them make me a prisoner. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or pride. You understand the risk. I understand my choice. Leah stepped closer. You promised me agency. This is me claiming it. Elias studied her for a long moment before nodding. Soren, call in 2 additional teams. I want every door, elevator, and stairwell covered. Full surveillance sweep of the building before we arrive. While Soren made arrangements, Leah gathered the tablets containing their evidence. Her hands were steady now, her purpose clear. The fear hadn't vanished, but it had transformed into something useful, a sharpened edge of determination. The night air was crisp as they loaded into the SUV. Elias sat beside her in the back seat, his shoulder touching hers. The city scrolled past their bulletproof windows, and Leah watched the familiar skyline draw closer. Additional security vehicles fell into formation around them. Soren took a circuitous route, doubling back several times to ensure no tails. By 9 o'clock, they were pulling into the penthouse's private garage. The elevator ride was silent except for the soft hum of machinery. Leah could feel the weight of cameras tracking their movement, the invisible web of protection Elias had woven around her, but it didn't feel like a cage anymore. As the doors opened onto the penthouse floor, she caught Elias watching her. His expression held something beyond mere guardianship now, a recognition of her strength, her choices, her determination to fight back on her own terms. Armed men stood at attention in the hallway by the stairs, near every potential entry point. Cameras pivoted smoothly in their housings. The security system glowed with active sensors. Leah stepped into the penthouse, head high. She had survived the warehouse. She had uncovered Duval's betrayal. She would see this through to the end, not as a victim or a pawn, but as the architect of justice. Behind her, Elias gave quiet orders to the security teams. The penthouse door closed with a soft click, locks engaging automatically. Outside, the city continued its endless pulse of life and light, unaware of the war being planned from this glass fortress in the sky. The private mail chute clicked as they entered the penthouse. A cream-colored envelope lay waiting, its paper thick and expensive. Leah picked it up, her fingers tracing the embossed Bridgade logo. It was delivered an hour ago, Soren reported, checking the security feed. Cleared screening. Inside was an invitation to a donor reception, along with handwritten directions from Captain Duval's office. Leah grabbed a pen from the counter and circled the details. writing "Trap" in bold letters across the top. "It's obvious," she said, laying the invitation flat on the kitchen island. "But it's also our best shot at catching him." Elias studied the invitation over her shoulder. "Tomorrow night, short notice." "That's intentional." Leah tapped the pen against the marble. "He wants us off balance. Then we use his urgency against him." Elias pulled out his phone, already coordinating with his team. They worked through the night, sleep forgotten as they mapped every angle. By morning, the plan had taken shape. Soren arrived with coffee and blueprints of the venue, a renovated historic hotel with underground parking access. "The reception's in the main ballroom," he explained, spreading the plans across the dining table. "Service floor above, parking structure below. We'll have teams in both." Leah traced the escape routes with her finger while she sipped her coffee. "Where will Duval likely try to isolate me?" "The donor lounge." Elias pointed to a secluded area off the main hall. "Private enough for his taste, but we can control the exits." By mid-morning, a discreet package arrived containing their key prop, a vintage crystal brooch with a sophisticated microphone hidden inside. Leah tested it while pacing the penthouse, her voice coming through clear on their secured channels. "Range is good," Soren confirmed. "Signal's encrypted." The afternoon brought more preparations. A dummy thumb drive was programmed to look legitimate, but would trigger silent alerts if accessed. Leah's evening gown was carefully chosen, elegant enough to blend with wealthy donors, but cut to allow movement if needed. "The journalist?" Leah asked as she practiced walking in her heels. "Alexandra Chen." Elias showed her a message on his secure phone. "She'll have a remote camera ready when we give the signal. Her reputation for exposing corruption makes her perfect. Duval can't discredit her without raising more questions." Evening found them running final checks. Soren's team reported in from their positions, voices quiet and professional in their earpieces. The vintage brooch was secured to Leah's dress, its crystal catching the light while concealing its true purpose. "Remember," Elias said as their car approached the venue, "let him think he's in control. The more paternal he acts, the more likely he'll slip," Leah finished. "I know." The hotel's grand entrance was lit with elegant sconces, wealthy donors arriving in expensive cars. Leah stepped out with practiced grace, Elias's hand briefly touching her back before he disappeared to his position. Inside, the reception flowed with champagne and practiced small talk. Leah moved through the crowd like she belonged, accepting a glass she wouldn't drink from, laughing at the right moments. She felt Duval's attention before she saw him, a practiced predator watching his prey. He approached with a politician's smile, all-concerned authority in his pressed uniform. "Ms. Hart, I'm so glad you could join us tonight." "Captain Duval." Leah let vulnerability seep into her voice. "Thank you for the invitation. Please, come sit with me." He gestured toward the donor lounge. "We should discuss your situation privately." The lounge was exactly as expected. Intimate lighting, plush chairs, false privacy. Through her earpiece, she heard Soren confirming positions. "I've been so worried about you," Duval said, closing the door most of the way. "After what happened with your father, I have connections. I can arrange protective custody somewhere safe." Leah widened her eyes. "You have that kind of authority?" "Let's say I have channels." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Ways to move people and assets through customs quietly. The trust documents you hold, I could help secure them properly." "The access codes are encrypted," Leah said, touching the dummy drive in her clutch. "But if you really can protect them..." Duval leaned forward as she withdrew the drive. "You're doing the right thing, my dear. Let me take care of..." The door burst open. Elias filled the frame, his presence suddenly dominating the small space. Duval jerked back, hand instinctively moving toward his hip. "Step away from her." Elias's voice was arctic. Through the cracked door, a camera lens caught everything. Duval's uniform, his reaching hand, the drive he'd been so eager to take. Tomorrow, Alexandra Chen would have her story ready. "This is a private conversation," Duval snapped, but his authority act was cracking. "It's over, Captain." Leah stood stepping away from him. "We both know what those channels really are." Soren appeared in the doorway, other security melting from the shadows. Duval's eyes darted between them, calculating odds and angles. "You're making a mistake," he said finally, straightening his jacket. "We could have helped each other." "You're free to go," Elias said, the words carrying clear meaning. They needed Duval mobile, needed him to panic and run to Dragan. Duval walked out with rigid dignity, but his face had lost color. As soon as he was gone, Leah let out a slow breath. one piece in place, one step closer to ending this. She met Elias's gaze across the room, saw the same determination reflected there. He nodded once. One more step. Sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Elias's master bedroom. Leah blinked awake, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings, cream walls, dark furniture, and sheets that felt like clouds against her skin. The guest suites were being swept for bugs, and this was the only room Soren deemed completely secure. She'd slept on one side of the massive bed, Elias on a leather chair across the room. Now she heard soft notes drifting in from the living area. Following the sound, she found him at the piano, fingers moving with precise care as he adjusted each string. Morning light caught his profile, softening the hard edges. His usual suit was absent, replaced by a black sweater with rolled sleeves. The tuning lever moved methodically from pin to pin while he tested each note. "Is this how you center yourself?" Leah asked, patting closer in borrowed sleep clothes. His hands stilled briefly. "Music follows rules, numbers, patterns. When things get chaotic, this helps me think." She settled on the bench beside him, careful not to touch. "Show me?" He demonstrated how tiny adjustments changed the pitch, explaining harmonics and overtones. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. This wasn't the man who executed threats with surgical precision. This was someone else entirely. "There's something I need to ask you," Leah said after a while. "The warehouse on River Street. Why is the third floor always locked?" Tension rippled across his shoulders. After a long moment, he stood. "I'll show you." At noon, they drove to the industrial district. The warehouse looked abandoned from outside, but inside was immaculate. Elias led her to a freight elevator, used a keycard, and pressed the third floor button. The doors opened to a space that felt nothing like a warehouse. Soft lighting, clean halls, and what looked like a medical wing. A woman in scrubs nodded to Elias as she passed. "This is a recovery center," he explained, "for women taken by trafficking rings. No cameras, no publicity, just beds, doctors, and lawyers who specialize in reversing forced documentation." Leah walked slowly down the hall, taking in the private rooms with actual beds, not hospital cots. A kitchen filled with real food. A library with comfortable chairs. Everything designed to give dignity back. "How long have you run this?" 4 years. After we broke up Kovac's pipeline, the system wasn't equipped to handle the aftermath, so... He gestured to the space. "We created something that was." "Why didn't you tell me before?" His jaw tightened. "I didn't want you thinking I was trying to trade on virtue. What we do here isn't meant to balance other choices." Understanding clicked into place. The micro-donations she'd spotted, the determination to dismantle Dragon's operation, his instant response when she was taken. This wasn't about power or territory. This was about protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. They spent hours there. Leah met the staff, trauma counselors, immigration lawyers, medical teams. Everything funded privately, no strings attached. When they finally left, the sun was setting over the river. Back at the penthouse, Leah watched Elias move through his evening routine, checking security feeds, confirming positions with Soren, scanning reports. When he finally settled at the piano again, she approached slowly. "Thank you," she said, "for showing me." He looked up, something vulnerable in his expression. "You needed to know the whole truth. I do now." The space between them felt charged, different than before. When she stepped closer, his hands stilled on the keys. She touched his shoulder, felt the tension there. "Leah." Her name was barely a whisper. "I choose this," she said clearly. "I choose you." She leaned down and kissed him. For a moment he was perfectly still, then his hand came up to cradle her face with impossible gentleness. When they broke apart, his eyes searched hers. "Are you sure?" In answer, she kissed him again. This time he stood, pulling her close as the kiss deepened. There was no fear now, no uncertainty, just heat and trust and wanting. They made their way to the bedroom in stages, stopping to kiss against walls, neither rushing. When they finally reached the bed, Elias paused. "Tell me what you want," he murmured against her neck. "You," she breathed, "just you." Their coming together was slow, tender, nothing like the violence of their world. His touches were reverent, learning what made her gasp and arch. She discovered the scars on his skin, the places that made him shudder. When he finally moved inside her, the connection felt like coming home. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets, her head on his chest while he traced patterns on her back. The city lights sparkled beyond the windows, but here in this space, time seemed suspended. "Stay." he whispered into her hair. I'm not going anywhere. They drifted to sleep wrapped around each other, the world outside held at bay by security systems and trained guards. At 3 a.m., Elias's phone buzzed once. He reached for it carefully, not disturbing Leah's sleep. The message from Soren was brief but clear. Duval made contact. Meeting with Dragan tomorrow evening. Elias set the phone aside and pulled Leah closer, memorizing the feel of her peaceful breath against his skin. Tomorrow would bring violence again, but for now, this moment was theirs. I have to be the one to hand over the codes, Leah said, her finger tracing the blueprint spread across the kitchen table. Dragan won't believe anything else. Elias's jaw tightened. It's too exposed. That's exactly why it has to be me. He knows I have direct access to the trust. A proxy won't work. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the map of the Maritime Exchange Hall. Every exit, every sight line was marked in Soren's precise handwriting. Walk me through it again, Elias said, his voice controlled but his knuckles white against the table edge. Leah pointed to the main floor. I'll sit here, with Duval and Dragan. The acoustics funnel toward this corner. Perfect for recording. You'll be behind this wall, no more than 15 feet away. Soren approached with a sleek black case. Comm unit, he explained, showing her the nearly invisible earpiece. And this? He held up an elegant silver watch. Has a panic button. 3 quick taps sends an immediate alert. The next hour was spent fitting the equipment, testing ranges, confirming signals. Leah practiced the sequence until her hands stopped shaking. Sit down, engage conversation, get Duval talking about the transport route, record everything. The moment anything feels wrong, Elias insisted, adjusting her comm, you signal. I don't care if it breaks cover, your safety comes first. I know. She caught his hand, squeezed once. Trust me to do this. The Maritime Exchange Hall loomed against the darkening sky, its stone facade worn by decades of river fog. Inside, the grand trading floor was eerily quiet, their footsteps echoing off marble walls. Soren's team moved like shadows, taking positions. The journalist's camera was already in place, hidden behind a decorative grate, with a clear view of the meeting table. Remember, Elias murmured, checking her comm one final time. One wall away, always. Leah nodded, straightened her jacket, and walked to the designated table. The trust documents felt heavy in her hands. Duval arrived first, all fake concern and paternal smiles. Ms. Hart, I'm so glad you're being reasonable about this. I just want it over, she replied, letting exhaustion color her voice. Dragan's entrance changed the air, something predatory in his movement that made her skin crawl. He sat without speaking, eyes fixed on the papers she held. Show me, he demanded. Leah spread out the property deeds. Everything's here, access codes, transfer authority, the whole trust. But I need guarantees. Of course, Duval soothed. We'll make sure you're safely away from Moretti's influence. I have arrangements in place. What kind of arrangements? Special transport, very discreet. We move delicate cargo all the time through bridge aid vans. The girls, Dragan cut in, impatient. Show him the schedule. Duval pulled out his phone. The loading dock will be clear at midnight. Police patrols redirected. Standard procedure for our special shipments. The confession hung in the air, caught perfectly by 2 recording devices and the journalist's directional mic. Then we have a deal. Leah kept her voice steady. Not quite. Duval stood, reaching for her arm. For your protection, you'll need to come with... The breach was silent and absolute. One moment Duval was touching her, the next he was slammed against the wall, Elias's men materializing from every shadow. Screens lit up around the room, banking interfaces showing accounts freezing in real time as Soren's tech team executed their part. Somewhere in the city, encrypted files were already hitting the journalist's inbox and the DA's secure server. Dragan lunged across the table, hands reaching for Leah's throat. The shot was so precise she barely registered the sound. Just Dragan falling, Elias's gun still raised, his other arm pulling her behind him. Wait, Duval wheezed, fumbling with his badge. We can work something out. I have other channels, Get her out, Elias commanded, and Soren was there, guiding Leah through a side exit as sirens began to rise in the distance. The SUV was already running. Leah's hands shook as she pulled off the comm unit. Elias appeared moments later, sliding in beside her as the vehicle pulled away from the curb. Breathe, he said softly, drawing her against his chest. Just breathe. She closed her eyes, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek. Behind them, red and blue lights began to paint the city streets. but they were already gone, vanished into the maze of back roads Soren had mapped hours ago. The adrenaline crash hit hard. Leah found herself shaking, fingers clutching Elias's shirt. He stroked her hair, murmuring quiet reassurance as they wound through the darkened streets. The recordings she managed, clear as crystal. Soren confirmed the data dump went through. By morning, every major news outlet will have the story. She nodded against his chest, finally letting herself believe it was over. The trust, her father's deals, Dragon's operation, Duval's protection, all of it exposed and dismantled in a single night. Soren took a complicated route back to the penthouse, doubling back and switching cars twice to ensure no tail. Through the tinted windows, Leah watched emergency vehicles race toward the maritime exchange. Soon the building would be swarming with legitimate law enforcement, but they would find only Duval, his badge, and enough evidence to bury him. The city lights blurred as exhaustion took hold. Elias kept his arms around her, solid and sure, as sirens echoed across the river and dawn crept closer with each passing minute. Morning light spilled across the penthouse balcony as news anchors' voices drifted from the living room television. Leah wrapped her hands around a steaming coffee mug, watching patrol boats slice through the river below. Beside her, Elias stood with his shoulder brushing hers, his presence steady and warm. Explosive evidence implicating Captain Miles Duval in a human trafficking operation. The broadcaster's voice carried through the open doors. The DA's office announces multiple indictments. Another anchor cut in. Bridge Aid Charity, confirmed as a front for... Leah took a long sip of coffee, letting the familiar bitter taste ground her. Dark circles shadowed both their eyes, but they were upright, alive, together. You should rest, Elias said softly. So should you. She turned to study his profile. When was the last time you slept? I'll sleep when the last warrant is served. 2 days later, they watched from Elias's office as rival crews fractured under the weight of arrests. Soren's updates came steadily. 3 lieutenants flipped on their bosses, 2 warehouse managers offered evidence, and a dozen dirty cops were suspended pending investigation. Bridge Aid's assets were frozen, then seized. The DA's office moved quickly, redirecting resources to legitimate shelters. When they asked Leah to oversee the transition, she accepted without hesitation. Are you sure? Elias asked that evening, finding her surrounded by shelter documentation. These women need someone who understands both sides of the system. She looked up at him. Someone who knows how to rebuild. He nodded, then slid a folder across her desk. Speaking of rebuilding. Inside were purchase papers for the Riverfront Club where everything had started. Leah's breath caught. What are you planning? A community arts center, he said. With your guidance, though I thought we'd keep one door, the barred one, as a reminder. Of what we're preventing, she finished. The following evening, Leah stood in a small chapel, surrounded by flickering candles. The memorial service for Patrick was intimate, just her, Elias, and a handful of others who'd known her father before debt consumed him. My father made choices, she said, her voice steady. Terrible choices that hurt people, but from those choices I found my purpose. Instead of selling daughters, we'll save them. Instead of breaking trust, we'll build it. Elias watched from the back, his presence a quiet anchor as she spoke her truth into the hushed space. Later that night, they stood in the transformed club space. The soft opening was hours away, but Elias had brought her early. Restored hardwood gleamed under gentle lighting. Art supplies waited in organized stations. The old dance floor remained, refinished, but holding echoes of its past. Elias took her hand, drawing her onto that floor. This is what you've built, he said, voice low and intimate. What you chose to create from ashes. What we built, she corrected. I couldn't have done this alone. Leah. He turned her to face him, his touch gentle but sure. I will spend every breath I have making your world safe. You are my home, my center, my truth. She reached up to touch his face, feeling the strength and vulnerability there. I choose you, she whispered, freely and forever. No claims needed, no obligations, just us, building something real. They left just before midnight, driving through streets they'd helped make safer. In the penthouse, they left the balcony doors open to the river. Air, Graybridge's lights flickered below like earthbound stars. For the first time, they prepared for bed without posted guards, without checking locks multiple times. This was a different kind of safety, one built on trust and choice rather than force and fear. Leah changed into sleep clothes that were now permanently stored in his dresser. Elias moved through his nighttime routine with domestic familiarity. They had built these small patterns together, creating something honest from chaos. The city hummed below, but its dangers felt distant now. Not gone. They were too realistic for that fantasy, but manageable. They had dismantled one network, exposed one corruption, saved one group of women. Tomorrow they would wake and continue the work together. "Are you still certain?" Elias asked as they settled into bed. "About all of it? About us? About the work?" She curled into his side. "Yes to both, are you?" "Since the moment you demanded answers instead of accepting fate." His arm tightened around her. "Since you chose to fight instead of break." The river breeze carried night air into their room, fresh and clean. Outside, boats cut quiet paths through dark water. Patrol cars made their rounds. The city lived its complex life while they found their place within it. Sleep came easier now, without the weight of threats and secrets. They had built something stronger than fear, more lasting than power. Their tomorrow would begin as a life they chose together. Not perfect, but real in theirs. Leah listened to Elias's breathing even out, felt her own exhaustion finally win. The last thing she registered was his heartbeat under her cheek, steady and sure, before sleep claimed them both. No guards posted, no weapons close at hand. Just them, together, finally home.